meeting of the Soquel Creek Water District. A couple things that I wanted to point out is that all of the meetings are streamed live on community television, and at the bottom of the agenda is the internet address, and then they're rebroadcast on Thursdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 6 p.m. On Comcast, it's channel 25, and on Charter, it's channel 71 following the meeting. And then the archive meetings are all available on our website. So just wanted to make that point before we start. And then I guess roll call shows that 4 of us are here. Director Daniels is at this point not here. The other thing I was just going to mention at the beginning is that we're going to trying something to make sure we remember to do our public comment each time and have things roll smoothly, is that at each item, before we do any deliberation on the board, we're going to hear public comment. And then that'll be it for public comment for that item. Okay? And then if they have further questions, they can contact the district later or talk to staff. Okay? So, no public hearing. We have a consent agenda item, which is the Memorandum of Understanding. So, any...
I read through it. I thought actually, I think it reflected what we had discussed.
So I'll entertain a motion to
I'll
approve
move
the
to
consent
approve it,
agenda.
or the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Oh.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so now it's time for oral communications on items not on tonight's agenda. So if there's anyone that wishes to address the board on one of those items, now would be the time. So, for things that are not on the agenda, correct. Welcome, Bruce. All we did was a consent agenda.
Is she coming up to talk or not?
So, you would like to speak on an item? That's fine. We'll give you a minute. Right up here to the podium, so that it's recorded and everyone can hear.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience and understanding. I'm a newbie at this. Yes, that's exactly. How's that? So
Perfect.
good?
Good.
My name's Jane Paradise, and I'm a 30-year resident of Soquel, and I actually live on Rosedale Avenue right next to the district. I'm a stone's throw away from there, and I've lived there for a long time, obviously. And I gotten a postcard in the mail about the Pure Water Reclamation Project, and there was meetings, and if you want to learn more about it, come to the meeting in December. And I had actually saw it on the TV, saw the PowerPoint presentation from Pure Water Monterey. And so I was aware of it. But I only recently found out because a letter was dropped off at our residence. And it asking us to give input on the landscaping and the architecture of what's happening in our neighborhood. So I found out from so another neighbor that apparently was aware of it because they went to the meeting, but we went and canvassed our neighborhood and nobody else knew about it, that it was actually going to be the location in our neighborhood. And typically, the rest of us, if you go to get a zoning change and you want to use a property that's not zoned appropriately, and you go for a zone change, you have to notify the neighborhood, and there's a whole vetting process, as any of you might know, including any commercial, that you have to notify the neighborhood in a timely manner so they have sufficient time to vet it and to contest the appropriate usage in that neighborhood. And so I'm here now to let you know that we have community resistance to having you folks have it in our neighborhood, which is a high residential neighborhood. There's many people that live around the neighborhood. Currently, it's office buildings and you use it for trucks, but sewage treatment plants are not an appropriate, this is not an appropriate location in our residential neighborhood, and we do not appreciate that there's any kind of taking advantage of any loopholes you may have to not having notified us appropriately or gone through the typical process that you would do, because the type of treatment that a sewage treatment plant facilities are an incredibly involved chemicals, biological, all of that, those issues, and it's a heavy manufacturing at the very least, and you would never get approval to put it in our neighborhood, but that apparently you folks feel that you are able to do that. So I'm here, I know I only have a few minutes, and I really appreciate you listening, and I know that there may be other, but just to let you know that there are more people that are coming forward to resist, because I did read the feasibility, some of the feasibility report.
It's your time's up.
Okay. And I'm just letting you know on notice that the
So-
community's in resistance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mona Salvage, and I live on Crystal Heights, which is right across the street from the water company, the entrance in and out. My concern is that none of us are notified on that side of the street. I don't know who else notified, but none of us have been notified. And I feel that we're being kept aside just because there'll be complaints about it, and that you need to notify everyone that's affected. And the upside or the cross the street of Soquel is affected because any odor that comes from a sanitation facility is upwind, and that will be affected. And there's no facility that doesn't, at some time or another, have odor. There's just no way that you can get around it. I have some knowledge of the sewer systems in that I lived at Canyon del Sol. And you know, Canyon del Sol and Sand Dollar community had their own sewage treatment plants. And so I have a fair idea how they operate. I know this is a much larger scale, but there are things that happen. And whether it's managed properly or not, there are things that happen. But it's totally out of place in that neighborhood, totally out of place. And whoever would purchase property totaling almost $2 million ahead and think they're going to get this through is a real waste of our money that goes to the water district. But my main concern is letting people know in the whole neighborhood what's going on and keep them informed. And you've got to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Seeing none, any board members?
I had a few things.
Do you have anything?
Pull 'em up. Yeah, so several customers have talked with me about the drought being over. And because the drought's over, they're under the mistaken impression that the problem with water is over. And so I know we're doing things with newsletters to try and counteract that, but I do think that this is something for the outreach committee to look at seriously, is that just as we during the drought we benefited from all the press on drought effects, and now there's quite a few articles talking about how the drought's over, and I think many of our customers are assuming that there's no longer a problem with water. So one thing that I talked about last time I was here, and I like the idea. It's a graphic like, you know, how you have when you have fundraising, you have a thermometer, and at the top of the thermometer is when you've reached your goal. Perhaps we can do something like that that's very visible, where current conditions with overdraft is where we're at, and top of the thermometer is recovery of the groundwater basins, and we can see what the progress is towards that. And towards that end, I do think we have to communicate to the public, you know, there's so much rain happening right now. It's just a natural assumption to make is that a lot of water is going into the ground, and we're really making taking a dent out of making a dent in the recovery of the basins. But I don't think that's the case, and I think we should, get that word out as well. How many winters like this would it take, without a supplemental water supply to recover the basins? I think it's dozens, if not hundreds. So, and I don't think people intuitively think that. So those are just the two things. It's really outreach.
Can I piggyback on that? It's just that since Vi Campbell, one of our education person, was at my classroom last week, teaching my kids about some of the water situation, and then also I invited the teacher next door to have her come in there. So she went and talked to those high school kids. But what was cool is that the teacher next door is having them do a project to explain why the rain is not taking care of the problem here. So,
Yeah.
it's at least it's going to get to some high school kids. But every little bit helps. So good for her.
Well, I was going to comment on the same thing, actually, that there was an article in the Santa Cruz Sentinel about this very issue. In Santa Cruz City, the drought is over, literally, because they filled their reservoir, and aside from the slight bumps they had in their pipes, they are okay for now. But Capitola, Soquel Creek Water District is not over the drought. We'd need 20 years at least of this kind of rain, but it might have been better if there was a little more emphasis in the newspaper article of exactly what our situation is, but that was my main article.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I'll just mention, just since I'm representing the water district on LAFCO, that I am the chairperson for this year as well. So next is reports. So special board assignments status report.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific to call out about in the special report section. However, staff would like some feedback from the board. We're struggling a little bit with these good ideas that are coming up and putting them on this list, because that's where we usually park them, and yet prioritizing them what's most important. So two great examples were last week, and they're not there. I haven't put them on the list yet, but Director Jaffe talked about this same topic, the droughts, the rains being here, but our problem not being solved, and a simple indicator to educate the public, which is very similar to what Director Daniels pulled off last time in some ways. So, and then Director Rochelle talked about water recharge and private-public partnerships. All good ideas, but what I realize is happening is we start stacking up here, and we have a hard time prioritizing them. So one idea that we brainstormed was behind this list, make a reserve list so we don't lose these good ideas. Put them there, and when the board's ready to elevate them, they could ask staff to bring it back as an item to agendize or something like that. So it gives you the power to kind of set that agenda, and we're not struggling, because when the list gets long, we start feeling conscious that we're not doing our job properly.
So so kind of they'd still have a list, but then we would prioritize them.
You want to
as far
move
as
something up, maybe,
so
I don't know what we call it,
that
but
they want them to be active versus reserve.
yeah,
list,
maybe the
something like
reserve
that.
list is could be a good title. If that is acceptable, we'll bring that back next time and put any ideas from tonight and last meeting on there.
Speaking of that, I know that one thing was taken off, which was the submittal deadline for board packet materials, and I would still like to have some discussion of that maybe at the next meeting, of perhaps adjusting that, because right now, they have to submit any written materials by the Wednesday before, and
Right.
so we're trying to figure out a way to have them be able to see what's on the agenda, still have a little bit of time to comment. So,
Okay.
you know,
Well, we can bring back, we have a
If you could just
policy
bring that-
that
something like that back.
addresses that a little bit, and then
okay.
we can go from there. So we'll bring that back next time.
Anything else on that?
You mean comment on the actual agenda? Or comment?
Well, on an
prepare
item
comment?
on the agenda,
Mm.
since it's not set, public doesn't see it till Friday,
Mhm.
they don't know what's on the agenda.
A written comment, I believe, is.
Only written comments.
Oh, okay,
Public comment at the meeting's always welcome. but-
okay.
Okay, but I meant, if they want to have a written comment read by us, we're trying to have them at least get to us so we have time to read them before the meeting.
Mhm.
So just so we can discuss that, what would work. So, actually, were there any, I forgot to ask for public comment on any of the status reports. Okay, seeing none, we'll continue with status reports then.
Yeah, so the board calendar is laid out in front of you. A couple things I'll mention are tomorrow from 4 to 5 is the Supplemental Supply Standing Committee. I think Melanie's brought in a consultant or two to talk to us. Should be a good meeting. And then, of course, next Tuesday on the 14th is the Public Outreach Committee. So, other than that, everything's pretty much laid out there. Again, remind the board, the entire board is attending the Water Reuse Conference, which should provide great education on all kinds of concerns you have and the public has expressed about water purification. I will add that there's one, let's see, Aqua is again coming back. We know it comes twice a year. It'll be on a future calendar, but wanted to get it in your mindset. It's from May 9th through the 12th. Usually, most people attend just a couple days in the middle, unless you're on a committee. I think Director Daniels is on one of the committees. And it's at Monterey this year, the Marriott there, so it's close. And we are working to have a meeting with the Bureau of Reclamation again. We did that at the last one, and maybe even try to see if they're interested in a tour, coming up and seeing our facility and learn more about our community water plan and pure water, Soquel. So May 9th through the 12th, just have that in the back of your mind.
So, Finance Committee, it's a written report, I think, tonight.
Yeah, Leslie's not here tonight, but I'd be glad to answer any questions, or maybe the people on the Finance Committee. I don't see our public representative here for that committee.
Carla, Rochelle, anything to add?
No, I didn't have anything to add to what was
Okay.
in the written report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I add one thing? I think at the
Yeah.
next meeting, Leslie's going to bring back an item to develop a rate committee, a subcommittee, so you'll see that come up.
Anything from Santa Cruz Mid-County Groundwater Agency?
Maybe Director Jaffe would like to report out.
Well, there's starting to do the necessary work to actually form a group to make the sustainable groundwater plan. So, been meeting twice a month.
Yeah.
Just had our second meeting. It's Ron and Rosemary and Ralph from Central Water District, Rosemary from Santa Cruz are there, and then John Benich, myself, John Kennedy, and I think that's it.
Tim Carson usually
Oh,
attends,
Tim
and
Carson.
and Darcy.
And Darcy Pruitt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, making progress, but there's a lot of issues to address.
Getting the details to bring back to the full
Exactly.
Right.
groundwater agency.
And Darcy's, I looked at her notes, and it was a very, very good summary of the meeting, so.
Good.
I think she's doing a great job.
Good. All right. Anything else? So then, next, We don't have any other status reports, so administrative business 7.1 is the first will-serve letter of the new WDO program.
That's correct. So this is the first applicant that has gone through the new program, and they've funded 24 toilets, the new 0.8 gallons per flush toilet. And they have a building permit, and they've completed this one step. Now this is the only time that the board will see this project. So if there are any questions, I can answer them. Also, there's a modified letter that kind of relates to these types of residential applications.
Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. Board questions or Bruce?
I had one thing. The proposed letter for this, under subject, it has insert street address, city, APN, and that's immediately followed by insert APN. So I assume you didn't want two APNs there?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Anyone else? Any motions?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. All right. So next is item 7.2, a discussion of the ascension of board vice president to president.
Oh,
No. Is there any?
Yeah, well, just that the board asked us to bring this back and contemplating if they wanted some alternate method to the board president staying at one term or some kind of alternating or whatever. So it's in front of you, and there's a history there attached to provide some context to it. We gave some pros and cons. Thank Karen for doing some research on this one, or not pros and cons, but what other districts do. Some rotate, others have a 2-year term, and you can see there. So there's various ways to approach it.
well, I had proposed this a meeting a while ago.
Asked for it already.
A meeting a while ago, and I can't remember that, but we, in the heat of the moment, I didn't get a second, and we didn't get a vote on it. But I thank you for putting this list, because I just didn't remember all the years and who had been the president over all these years, and it kind of confirms my feeling that the presidency tends to be stationary, and so my motive in this was to allow for a little bit more diversity in the presidency and give other people access to it, and to streamline voting for it so that we aren't reduced to a coin toss or close vote, or that we would just have a streamlined president ascension, as you put it. And in terms of how we would do it, how long the term would be, open to any ideas on that one. But
Anyone else?
no one has the vote.
I noticed on the list that from 1994 to 2003, that that's exactly what happened.
I saw that.
Or actually, to 2000, sorry, that the vice president became the president. So there must have been a desire for this at that point. Just so, a question for staff. So, in term, I like the idea of having, a change, because it gives a different perspective. Not that, I mean, you guys have done great jobs, but I think that it opens that up. But in terms of the 1 year versus 2 years, is there any advantage to one or the other as far as you're concerned, or is it transparent?
And Karen, speak up, because you did a lot of research if you want, but I saw her head looking at me saying, no, we didn't see that, and we didn't. We looked at it more for how were rotations made, like, some cities rotate through, everybody gets an opportunity. Mr. Basso might be able to provide, you've had a lot of experience, so please chime in too, but as far as 2 years, 1 year, I don't know. That's a good question. We didn't see that, come across anything in our research on it, so.
But not in research, just in practical.
Oh, in practice?
Yeah.
Well, because there's a number
don't
of
know.
series here. There's a number of series where the term is clearly longer than 1 year.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a,
Is there a training period?
Yeah. Is there a learning curve?
yeah.
Based on the research looking at prior minutes, it was really a product of no one else wanting to do it. Honestly, I mean, if you look back, especially in the earlier years, it was a motion that whoever was the president was doing a great job. Let's just keep it that way, and it went that way for years and years and years.
Well, we're lucky enough to have two people who are
Yeah.
in that position at this point. So I was just trying to recognize that fact at
Yeah.
the moment.
I think one thing that really has helped was when, I think it was Director Daniels, but maybe it was Director LaHue, started bringing the vice president in on the pre-agenda meetings. So whoever, the vice president could easily,
so they-
you've got that skill set.
There's a learning curve
Yeah,
there.
there's a little learning curve there. So I think that is probably, I think that's proved very valuable to the organization. And you now have adopted that to where you rotate a little bit, so there'll be a little bit more.
Yeah, but it still is a good idea to have two people involved in that, and especially the vice president. So, well, there's still no motion. Do you want me to move on my own idea? Okay, I move that the vice president automatically take the presidency in the following year, in alternate years, I guess.
I'll second.
Okay. And then, just to be clear, then each year you would just be basically electing the vice president, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that could be
Basically.
whoever. Okay. Okay. Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's unanimous.
All right,
There you
let's-
go,
let's
Carla.
try that.
Why not? So, we'll move to 7.3, status update and board discussion on the stormwater recharge.
Good evening. Tonight we're bringing item 7.3 to the board to provide an update on the progress of regional stormwater recharge projects. The board has expressed interest in stormwater recharge both as a water demand offset project, and it has been incorporated into the community water plan's guiding principles. So the goal of this information presented in this memo is that the information presented in this memo will give the board an idea of where we are so far and some of our next steps and what they would be to fully assess any project moving forward. And in this memo, we also give a brief overview of the drywall paper that was brought to the board by Director Daniels, so that you may have a chance to discuss it. And this is just an informational memo, and we're only asking the board to consider when you may want us to come back with another update on this material. So as far as the regional work goes, quite a bit has been done in the last year. The UCSC Hydrogeology Group, which is led by Andy Fisher, and the Resource Conservation District are leading the way on mapping the suitable areas for stormwater recharge in Santa Cruz and North Monterey counties. They're specifically focusing on assessing
No, you're good. Oh, you want this?
on assessing the suitability of medium-scale infiltration projects. So these are projects that kind of fall in between the low-impacts development and the larger regional infiltration projects. Andy Fisher did give a presentation to the board last January, and at the time, only the surface factors had been incorporated into their model. And since then, the subsurface factors have been incorporated for our service area, and the results have been posted on RCD's website, and they have released a report. So the next slide. So here is one of the maps that's included in the report, and this includes all of the areas which were assessed by Andy and RCD. And the green signifies the areas with the highest suitability for the managed aquifer recharge. And the pinkish color is on the other end of the spectrum and would have a lower suitability. And so this is the area that's the mid-Santa Cruz County, and so this is where we fall in there. And you can see that there's a smaller outline in that map, and that has 6 factors, 6 suitability factors when they were assessing all the surface and subsurface factors. That was the area that had the most data. And so in this really kind of zoomed out look of it, we can see that our service area that's overlaying the Aromas has the higher recharge potential and is greener, and that on the other side of the service area we do have some areas that were assessed as having a lower suitability for recharge. So this initial work is a useful screening tool, but the extreme variability in sites really suggests that there is a lot more work to be done to narrow down specific sites that would have a high potential. So the county's environmental health department is kind of taking that lead role to narrow down those sites for potential projects on public or large private parcels. District staff is attending a meeting with them, RCD, Andy Fisher, and some other agencies this coming Friday, and to talk about how this mapping effort can help us to pinpoint those locations which will be best for a project in our area, and what the next steps might be to make these projects a reality. So switching gears a little bit, we were also using this memo as an opportunity for the board to discuss the paper that was brought by Director Daniels on using dry wells for aquifer recharge and their groundwater contamination potential. This paper discusses a few key ideas, such as the importance of dry well design and placement, how water quality may be affected, and the difficulty of assessing recharge quantities. So these ideas are laid out in the memo for the board's consideration. As noted earlier, there's just a couple of motions for the board on how to give staff direction on when an update should be brought back. And given what we know now, we suggest that a time frame of 3 to 4 months from now would be appropriate.
Can
Is there
I
anyone
add a couple things real
Oh,
quick?
sure.
Chris Coburn with the RCD is here, as well as John Ricker with the County Environmental Health Department that have been doing a lot of this work. So
Great.
if you have any questions for them.
Excellent. And is there anybody from the public that would wish to speak on this item? Okay. Not seeing none. Any board questions?
I think John or Chris might, John Ricker, the water director for the county, might indicate he might want to come. Is that okay?
Well, that'd be great.
Okay.
I really, I'd be interested, even though 3 to 4 months sounds great, because I was going to say, I really want to keep getting regular updates, but I also, you know, if something cool comes out of that next meeting, you know, just give us a little verbal update, nothing fancy.
Good evening. I'm John Ricker with the County of Santa Cruz. We're, you know, very encouraged by this sort of project and really looking forward to working with the district to promote these things. We think there's a good history already. We have put in 3 recharge projects at county parks already, at Polo Grounds Parks and at Bromer, and we're estimating that we've gotten up to 25 acre-feet into the ground this year so far, this rainy season. So the technology seems to work well. You know, even places where the surface conditions may not be completely suitable, we've been able to go through those lower permeability layers, the clay layers, and then get into the more permeable layers. We've been monitoring the water levels in these dry wells, and one storm they filled all the way to the top, it dropped right back off, and most of the other storms they don't even fill up. So they do seem to be accepting the water well. This is at the Bromer facility where we've been monitoring that more closely than the Polo Grounds. The studies that have been done looking at some of these dry wells and water quality issues seem to indicate that with proper management measures and design, they do protect water quality and they do work well. So the LA basin was monitoring, I think some for over 6 years, and other places they've been monitoring, Modesto 25 years, and they seem to be working well. I think there's a lot of good opportunities. We have more parks facilities coming along that have expressed an interest, and the park staff will be meeting with us this week also. The 38th Avenue Detention Basin already collects a significant amount of stormwater runoff in one place, and it's a good spot to get it into the ground. So we have a number of good possibilities. We also have a number of developers that are interested in applying their WDO requirements to funding these sorts of projects. So if your district would allow those developers to essentially meet their WDO requirements by funding these projects, a lot of them are ready to go and to start contributing funds to do the additional feasibility studies that confirm the projects are good and then go with them. So I think there's a lot of good progress. We may be able to move faster than 2 or 3 months. We did apply for one grant under Prop 1, but the state decided to just fund really large multi-million-dollar projects in Southern California and didn't fund any of our local projects. But again, the funding that's available through the developers, through the WDO program, could really move these things along. So we're glad to have your district's support and participation in that. Thank you.
Questions?
John, oh,
Okay.
Go for it.
Oh, I
Tell you
just
about
wanted
the
to
one.
ask you, so
Two
do you ever
limited
work with get any of the money from the stormwater budget that the county collects?
The stormwater budget is woefully inadequate to fund anything.
Really?
Yeah, the county does not really collect much stormwater money. The Zone 5 is the only drainage zone that actually collects a decent amount of money.
Seemed
The
like
other
a lot.
zones,
It seemed
Zone
like a lot.
6, the rest of the county, there's really no money that comes in, and it all generally gets sucked up by doing the stormwater program required by the state, which is very staff intensive, resource intensive. Zone 5 does have some projects. I mean, Zone 5 funded the 38th Avenue Detention Basin in the first place, but they also got a lot of money from the redevelopment agency. But with the demise of the redevelopment agencies, there just hasn't been much money for that Zone 5 drainage district.
Yeah, because it seemed like there was a lot of money flowing through that.
There was, yeah, but that
So
went
it
away
was
with
definitely
redevelopment.
was.
Yeah.
I thought they were just holding it up. I was thinking that they might have been holding it up because they thought these projects weren't efficient enough, and that you're getting, there are some projects now that are demonstrating pretty good efficiency in recharging water, stormwater, and I was just wondering if you made a presentation to them.
Yeah, we're working with the Public Works Drainage folks on the 38th Avenue Detention Basin on that, trying to take that water that's being collected instead of just pumping it out to the ocean, put it into the basin. I forget which one of you is on the Zone 5 board, but
Well, that would be me.
you
That's
may-
why.
you
That's
may-
why you see
you
the
may
budget.
actually know more about it than I do.
Well, I was
What-
skeptical. I mean, I just see them approving all this money, and it wasn't for any stormwater recharge projects.
Right,
So,
right.
and so then I talked to someone at Bromer, one of the
Mhm.
researchers on that, And they said, well, you know, it was getting a pretty high efficiency, cost efficiency,
Yeah,
cost effectiveness. It just needed a big wet season, I guess. It was raining the day I went on that tour,
mhm.
and it was just the beginning of an seemingly endless wet
Right.
season. So I was just wondering, do you have any new data on that?
Well, and the Brommer facility at the Bromer Park, that's pretty much all gone in. We haven't really seen any overflow at all. That it's been catching everything, and it's all been going into all those pits. But unfortunately, the catchment area there is relatively small. It's only about a third of an acre. So even though we've been catching it all, it's less than a total of an acre foot. But again, as we demonstrate that these things can work, we're getting more interest from the engineers and from the public works types, and with our requirements from the state and our local requirements for any new development or any redevelopment, we do have to infiltrate water. I mean, there is a requirement to deal with the stormwater, so we're seeing more of the private sector projects proposing dry wells and that sort of thing, but that doesn't really deal with sort of the existing runoff from the urban areas. That just deals with the new increments of runoff.
Well, I know, but you need a demonstration project to show that you could actually do something that's cost effective.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
that
we've done
was-
that at both Bromer and at Polo, so it's catching on, it seems like.
I know, because when we read the Journal of Hydrology article, there are these communities that have literally hundreds of these kind of stormwater recycling projects
Yeah,
going on.
yeah. Yeah, I was recently down in Phoenix, and all the new subdivisions have whole lots dedicated to just capturing and infiltrating the
Yeah.
stormwater from the subdivision. It's pretty amazing how much of that there is down there, and even in a fairly arid climate like that.
Yeah, so I'm
But-
really interested in it, but yeah, I was amazed at how far actually the science has even gone.
Yeah. And then we're also looking at it just in terms of the larger mid-county groundwater basin, particularly when we look at, how can inland pumpers mitigate their impacts? And it gets down to more of the smaller LID sorts of things, but they're in a position to put more water back into the ground. It's kind of hard for them to find a supplemental water supply, but they can capture more water, and that may be a way for some of the inland folks to participate in basin sustainability for the mid-county basin.
Good point. Rochelle had a question.
One of my pet ideas for years has been SqCWD Golf Course. They have a terrible time with their drainage when it's raining, and it seems like it should be a great location to do some kind of recharge with dry wells. And I was looking at that map that you put up there with all the pixels, and I'm like, okay, where is it in that map? I couldn't tell, but are you looking at that?
We have not looked at SqCWD yet. It seems like it would be similar to the polo grounds, sort of geologically and soils.
My backyard is, yeah.
It's not as far inland as polo grounds, but polo grounds did have issues with, the surface permeability was not that great. So again, we used 30-foot dry wells to get down through that surface material into the much more permeable material. Ran the stormwater through bioswales first to clean it up, and then into the subsurface, and those seem to be working well.
I know people at the dog park are wondering where the drainage is there because it's been a big mess at the polo grounds. So,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things I'd really like somebody to focus on is the golf course. I know that they would be happy to participate in relieving their drainage problems, and they have their own private wells that would benefit from it. So I think it would be a really good partnership to look into.
And that's one of the things the Resource Conservation District has been doing down with the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency, is looking at how people can, say, offset their pumping costs by putting in recharge projects. So that's another incentive for them to do something, particularly as we move into folks needing to pay for their share of the impact on the basin. Again, they can mitigate it and potentially pay for it with recharge projects. Again, provided we can document that the projects are well located and are going to do what they need to do to help the basin.
Bruce, you had some?
Not comments. I mean, not
Just
questions.
comments. Okay, so no more questions for John? I had one, but go ahead. You go first.
Just, so when you put one of these dry wells in, when you have a aquifer like the Prisma, it's going into specific layers. Do you know what layers are being recharged?
Yes, we do the subsurface investigations, look at the geology. When we developed the designs for both of these projects, we had Mike Cloud working with us, who's very familiar with the underlying geology. And the Bromer Park project, that's going into the A unit, and the Polo Grounds is going into the F unit. Both of those being the more permeable units, so they're more, you can get more water into those particular units.
Are you also just, looking at areas where we have some seawater intrusion and maybe mitigating? Do we have seawater intrusion over in the Sand Dollar area and Canyon del Sol?
Yeah.
So using their sewage and recycling it, or their drainage and putting it in I know that they do somewhat do that, because I know Canyon puts their water in their
Right.
their median area or whatever it is, the parking
Yeah,
strip.
they've been looking at that, and we're thinking, you know, the 38th Avenue site is potentially upgradient of where we see seawater intrusion out at Pleasure Point, so that may help benefit that particular location as well as potentially further down in the basin, but,
And of course, my last complaint is the flooding down in Rio Del Mar Esplanade, and you know, having an engineering design to just pump the crap out of it into the ocean to relieve the flooding, and I just think that that's a waste of all that water, and there should be some other way to deal with it, but that's for another day.
yeah, I know.
I had a question on the site on Long Freedom Boulevard, right where Aptos High is. There's like there's a retention basin for stormwater there. Do you know if that would be a potential site, since
You
it's
know,
already got that
that's,
structure?
Geologically, that seems like it would be a good site. It was originally, I think, designed as a detention basin
Yeah.
to mitigate the impacts from the Aptos High playing fields. One of the problems with some of these sites is if you don't have something to capture like the fine sediment, you can plug up the infiltrative surface with these, you know, if you've got a basin. That's why we're not really looking so much at basins or spreading grounds around here, because we have finer material. And then you also have the potential sediment issue that can plug those up. I'm not sure what it would take to make that one
I mean,
work better.
it's in the little pink area on the map
Yeah.
that shows a good recharge area.
All that pixel.
Yeah.
No, that's a good, that would make sense to look at that. I mean, just like 38th Avenue, where we look at where we've already got, where we
Right.
may already be halfway there,
Exactly.
you know, do a little bit more to make that work better as a recharge project, since it's already collecting water.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, John. From RCD.
Yeah, Chris Coburn, Executive Director, Resource Conservation District. John stole a little of my thunder, so I won't go over the things that he said. But just on behalf of the work that the RCD has been doing with Dr. Fisher at UCSC, we are excited that we've been able to implement one basin. We have grant funding to implement a fairly large basin, hopefully this summer. And then we have two other facilities that we're looking to implement. Those would be not so much spreading basins, but more sort of along the lines of the Polo Grounds and Bromer sites, but using a prefabbed infiltration gallery type system for recharge. We're just, the partnership has worked really well, working to do the suitability analysis, and then now we're moving forward to actually going out and engaging with landowners where they're willing to implement these types of structures. And John mentioned the recharge net metering program that we're working on with PV Water and UCSC. And basically the idea there is to provide an incentive for landowners to implement these types of facilities, and then also manage them over time, because as John mentioned, especially with those spreading basins, you can get a fair amount of sedimentation, and those do limit the infiltration capacity over time, so you need to go in there and clean them out, or otherwise scrape it up somehow to keep that infiltration going. I was just actually looking at a report that Andy and his team are putting together. It's pretty exciting looking at the 5-year performance of the basin that's been implemented down off of Highway 129. Hopefully that'll be out in the very near future for you all to see, and that gets into the benefits of the basin, specifically on recharge to the underlying aquifer. And that's interesting because it was done during the drought years, so it's, you know, the sort of marginal years where we're looking on about 100 acre feet per year of recharge from that basin. And so that's during drought years. And it's also interesting to see the impact of a single large storm event on the infiltration. It's interesting that one large storm and what we're seeing today, I'm looking forward to see the data next year as well too. So hopefully we'll get those basins in the ground next year. We're looking forward to hopefully partnering with the district, the Resource Conservation District. You know, it's our mission to help people protect, conserve, and restore natural resources. We work voluntarily with landowners, and if there's a role for us, we'd certainly like to explore that with your board and your staff. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we're pretty willing to be partners.
Okay, great.
And we appreciate the work that you guys have done to date and for taking the lead on this.
Thank you.
You know,
Yep,
so
great. Thanks.
do what we can to help.
Thank
Maybe
you.
you're the one that should be working with SqCWD Golf Course.
Happy to do it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Not John.
Bruce, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, a few things. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say you need to recognize that simply getting water into the ground is not the same as recharge. Because much of our stuff around here, we have this, you know, terrace deposit, this, you know, several tens of feet of largely clay. So, you know, the water can go down under the ground surface, but then with the clay, it just kind of goes sideways and ends up in a creek or something like that. So that needs to be careful. And certainly that's the reason we're looking at the dry wells, is to get down below that. But even if you get, you know, down below that, it doesn't mean that you're really recharging the basin as you need to. For example, if you want to recharge easily, you just take the water and dump it in the nearest beach, and that clearly recharges the beach. But obviously, it's instantly going to go out into the ocean, so you're not actually achieving anything. And that was an issue for us with Bromer, is that Bromer is down gradient of all of our production wells. And so it doesn't really help us, it helps the city. In fact, it's another thing, it's outside the district, so we'd have to have we've never allowed offsets to happen outside the district boundary, so we'd have to have a change of that. But in any case, it wouldn't help any of our wells. So putting money into it does not achieve what we want to achieve, which is, you know, offsets of the pumping that these new developments would have. And so given the speculative nature to all this, one of the things that worries me is, are we going to use up all of our WDO money doing research and investigation and tests and so forth, and maybe even end up at the end of the day deciding it doesn't work, and we'll have already spent all of our WDO money. So I think the way to do this, until we really know whether this works, is the district should fund this, and if it eventually works, then get reimbursed with the WDO money. Because otherwise, we could end up spending money and getting no benefit for offsets.
I kind of agree that at least to the point where we could fund the research to know that it's a definite site, like maybe the pilot tests have been done, and then now it just needs to be funded to actually build it.
Right. And finally, I'm kind of chagrined with the second to the last sentence in this report, which says, staff tentatively estimates that a more detailed project plan could be formulated by next year.
Yeah.
So this is going out, in fact, if this is looking like it's going to take a decade or years to do, I think I would like to bring back our WDO program that we just approved and get rid of the 100-100 split. And instead, let's go to just doing toilet offits until we find something that actually can work. Because we can't just accumulate money and money and money and not actually accomplish anything with it.
Can I add, I mean, when I read that, my thought was that to get an update, I had said, you had said 3 to 4 months, but I said at least in 6 months maybe, but not just an update, that with the goal of having some possible sites to pick by that time. Like where there's an actual goal to say, okay, here are some possible things that would really work. So you were going to add something.
Yeah, I think we're so early on in this process, and we'll know a lot more after Friday. But it was really hard to kind of estimate when we could maybe have a site or have a site with a project underway. We just don't know right now, and so we had to leave it fairly open-ended. But, I mean, we're hoping that we can move much quicker than that, and we're certainly planning on keeping you up to date along the way. You know, we do our monthly status reports for the Conservation Department, so that would be the mechanism that we would keep you up to date, and then we would maybe come back in a few months with a more detailed report of how things are going. Or, like you said, Tom, we could, you know, if something big happens, we would certainly bring it back sooner. So it's just a lot of uncertainty right now about what's going to come out of the meeting on Friday and what the next steps are. And I think because of the cost of these projects and the fact that, you know, we don't want to sink a lot of WDO money into investigations only to find out that projects won't work, that we really do need to work with partners and get some other funding sources for these sorts of projects.
In fact, I'm wondering, I know clearly we're understaffed for doing this, so maybe things to consider might be to outsource this investigation, get some other group to do it, if we need more power to make progress on it. So just something to
I think
consider.
I had the same sentiment that, like, and you were gonna say something too, just that if we need extra manpower to have this happen sooner, to have some sites identified, then that's fine. And we fund that, and once we have a project, then we have the WDO program involved.
Because one thing to consider is it's not just the new WDOs. All of the old WDOs that were not matched by the small amount of offsets we had left to buy, all those, 200% of those, it needs to be done by this same program.
Right.
So we're going to accumulate a lot of money real quickly, and we need to get that into the ground.
Right.
My opinion.
So, we could have a motion related to when we want updates, if anybody has that, because they asked for a motion.
Oh, really?
Just to make it clear.
Well, since you're going to have, maybe with this meeting, there'll be something to report out, maybe 3 months or something like that. Or sooner, or report out.
How
on
about,
the meeting.
how we have a motion to have an update no later than 3 to 4 months from now?
That's good. Okay, you want me to move that? Okay, I move that we get an update 3 to 4 months from now.
Or sooner if you have it.
A formal update, and then we'll, of course, keep you informed through the monthly status reports of
Okay.
details.
I'll
And-
second that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, anything else?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Bruce. I want the recharge programs to be, or projects to be in Aptos, Capitola, that, you know, are going to affect our wells
Right.
and help us.
Unfortunately, that affects the golf course, because the
Well-
golf course is downgraded of all of our production wells.
It is, but it is also seawater intrusion issues, right?
Well, we'll worry about the specifics. But we'll hopefully find some good sites. All right, next item is 7.4. This is the overview of recycled water for groundwater replenishment.
Yeah, Melanie Mal Schumacher's going to present this, and we have
Oh, Sonny's on the line.
line.
Thought maybe he was still in town.
Welcome to Turbo Bridge. Please enter your conference ID. Please enter your host PIN.
Where did you get the accent?
Everyone thinks that
Conference will
British
begin
accents are
when the next
classier.
party joins.
Are you there, Sonny?
Yes, good evening.
Hi, Sonny, we're all here. So on the line is a consultant from Brown and Caldwell, Sonny Wang.
Hi, good evening. I'm going to go ahead and give a brief overview, and Sunny is available for questions and to further explain the white paper that Brown and Caldwell produced. The white paper that's attached to this agenda item is an overview of recycled water for groundwater replenishment, specifically to address, California with some examples out of the state in terms of the type of projects, the regulations, and example projects. The white paper and the information generated came from a lot of questions and confusion related to groundwater replenishment projects in California and how they're regulated and what the components are. We heard a lot of questions from our constituents and our community related to the types. There are two types. There's subsurface using recharge wells, and there's surface applications using spreading basins. Both of those types of projects, as you can see here, this is the recharge well, which is very similar to what is being looked at for Pure Water Soquel. And this is a spreading basin. So some of the main differences, and just in terms of the types of projects, are treatment. So as you know, in the Pure Water Soquel project, we're looking at full advanced treatment, which would include microfiltration, reverse osmosis, UV, and advanced oxidation to get a 12-10-10 log removal. For spreading basins, the water is actually Title 22. It does require what they call an SAT, which is soil aquifer. And let me make sure, because we're not evaluating this one, what the terminology is. There is a acronym here. Soil aquifer treatment still gets the 12-10-10 log removal, but the treatment process does account for removal through the soils. Some interesting points related to these two types of projects is that both of these projects are what they consider indirect potable reuse in California. The California State Water Resources Control Board and the Division of Drinking Water have adopted regulations in California. The Uniform Water Recycling Criteria was adopted in 2014, and the regulations specifically to water quality operations, the monitoring that would be involved, and treatment regulations would all be a part of that. What's interesting to note in the technical memo is that we did try to provide some specific information related to the recharge wells in terms of the operations and construction. I won't go through that because I'll fumble. We did get a lot of questions from those that were nearby the recharge well proposed in our mid-county region about what type of construction, how long would it take, what's the duration, what is the noise. So we do have information in there and specific details related to sample projects, including pictures of recharge wells that are either exterior or inside of a building. We also have some information related to spreading basins. We didn't focus too much on the surface application since that's not an option that Soquel Creek Water District is looking at. I would like to note that, as you know, as we just covered the item before, there are difficulties in siting stormwater capture in our county due to space constraints and having a beneficial replenishment of the groundwater basin. But for example, the LA County Montebello forebay recharges about 44 million gallons a day, and that's spread over 560 acres. So it's a very large area. I'm not even going to say that it is equal linearly to what would be here, but if it were, that would mean for our size project, which is a 1,500 acre foot per year project, we'd need about 16 acres. To do full basin recovery, we'd need about twice that. So in an area that's landlocked like Santa Cruz County, that's hard to come by. But I do have Sunny Wang on the phone, so if the board or anybody in the public has questions related to the tech memo, he's available. What we'd like to do is build off of this information. This is informational, to then create some smaller fact sheets, information on the website, using the graphics and the pictures and the information.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none. Board questions?
I had one in,
Go ahead.
You want to go
No, you
first?
go. I think Bruce should go before Bruce.
First. Who's last?
Go ahead.
I had a question about the TOC requirements. It's on page 148 of 194, and it talks about monitoring the applied recycled water for TOC on a weekly basis. And my question was, Sonny, are there agencies that monitor more frequently? And is there continuous monitoring that goes on in any agencies?
Yeah, there's instruments now, for example, Orange County Water District, they monitor their TOC continuously. There's online instrumentation available now, so that's just the minimum.
Right.
It's online available.
Okay. Well,
Thought I remembered.
that's what I remember too, and I think that's a good idea to monitor continuously. Because if you monitor weekly, things can happen between when you monitor.
Yeah, I think this instrument was vetted, I want to say, 3-4 years ago. So during when the regulations were being developed and finalized, the instrument was still undergoing testing for compliance.
Gotcha.
You have another question, or? Hey, Bruce?
So my question is on page 152. And there's a few other places in the packet here where that same thing happens, which is, it says California State Water Resources Control Board, Regional Board. And of course, those are different institutions completely. So it's like saying Supreme Court, Superior Court. Those are not the same. I find it confusing. I'm not saying that necessarily the preparers got confused, but it should say Water Board if it means the State Water Resources Control Board. There are 9 regional boards, and there's one.
They're connected, but
They're connected, just like the Superior Court and the Supreme Court are connected. But they're different animals. They're different institutions. So I found it confusing not knowing exactly which one he's talking about. We have a local regional board. It's the Central Coast Regional Board. There are 9 regional boards, and there's one State Water Resources Control Board based in Sacramento. So it needs to be clear as to which one you're talking about.
Okay, I'll take a look again to make sure they're well defined and clarified. There is, both agencies are involved, so that could be used interchangeably, I think, depending on how it's used. So I will make sure those are differentiated.
In fact, down at the bottom, the last sentence on the page says, the regional board is now completing final reviews before posting for public comment. I think actually what you mean is the water board, the Sacramento State Board.
Because that's where Department of Drinking Water is.
Yes. So again, a confusion between regional board and the State Water Board. That's it.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I think that's primarily informational. Correct?
Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate that this, Melanie brought forth this memo with our consultants just to try to respond to what we hear from the public. Some people didn't understand recharge wells, so it gives a good overview of that. Some people thought spreading ponds might be a panacea. I know Alyssa showed a spreading pond down in LA. That was one of the pictures that was up there, and it was, in place way before development came on board, in the 50s kind of thing. So we're past that. But anyway, I think
The
it's
other
very
thing Bruce mentioned, in addition to not having the space, is you could have a great spreading pond, but it's not going to go to the layer you need it to.
right, especially in our pancake
if we
layer
had-
area, in the Prisma area.
Right.
As soon as it hits a clay layer, it goes horizontal. It's not going to has a hard time getting past that.
And with small homes selling for $1 and $2 million, you can imagine how much getting 16 acres would cost.
Prime recharge, yeah.
Yes.
All right, so the next item, 7.5, is the Clubhouse Drive main replacement.
Bye, Sunny.
Thank you, Sunny, we're hanging up.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sonny.
Good evening. The Clubhouse Drive is a street that you guys have heard before. Unfortunately, most streets that are quiet are streets that aren't breaking mains. But Clubhouse Drive is one of those known failure points in our system. between St. Andrews and the golf course has had numerous breaks in the main and one known service line break. We're proposing to replace that and expedite that replacement. The current main has been there since 1962, and it's not necessarily the age that's the issue. It's the thickness of the wall of the pipe, and it's just not rated for the long duration of pressure issues that we've seen in that area. It's about 2,600 feet. We have in the budget we ranked several main replacements, and Soquel Drive, the cast iron project, ranked higher than that at the time. But in reevaluating that, there are higher likelihood of property damage on Clubhouse Drive if it breaks again. And so what we'd like to do is kind of switch the funding there, or it could also be funded through a COP, the certificates of participation. But we'd like to just elevate it to a funded status, and I wish Leslie were here to guide us. She's planning to bring back later this month, or I believe it's the next meeting, a list of projects that we want to lift up in the priority list. And this would be, we're kind of preempting that, but we'd like to get started. We do have approval from the county that this project is exempt from a coastal permit. And we're in the process of securing an encroachment permit. We've talked to 2 contractors, so we do anticipate bringing back a bid for you guys to consider in 2 weeks and award. So we do plan to do a competitive bid, but more focused to 2 contractors that are ready and willing to start in a relatively quick time frame. There's 2 options that we can do. Time and materials, which has set markups for equipment and labor and materials. And then also we are putting together a bid sheet that is more of a lump sum total bid price. Contractors can pad those if there are unknowns. Fortunately, we did survey this street, so we have a lot of the utility information on our plans. So we're going to look at both of those, and we'll bring back to you a recommendation to the next meeting and try to move forward later in the month.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Okay, board questions?
I'm looking at the, by the way, thanks for being flexible and diligent and so forth in looking at this. I'm looking at the map on page, 177. It's the overview map. And I see there's lots of AC there. So I'm wondering, clearly the clubhouse segment is a problem, but fixing that might mean that the bursts of pressure we might get going through the system will just come out somewhere else. So is that, do you think, going to be an issue that we'll end up just having breaks elsewhere? And shouldn't we prioritize the whole area maybe?
Well, we do have, in our master plan, we do have a larger proposal for this area. The transmission of water in this area is limited, and we do propose a project that goes all the way to Rio Del Mar Boulevard, to SqCWD Boulevard. Kind of like the backbone that we have in Soquel Drive, we kind of need something like that here. It's a good question. We haven't seen the breaks, and if you plug a hole here, you're going to pop another one elsewhere.
Right.
It's a good question. It's hard to say. We do have St. Andrews Way, for instance, that was built in 1961 as well. We may just have to see how it goes. This is a project that we know needs to be done. We would like, if we were going to plan to do that, we would try to bid it much more competitively.
Exactly.
But this one is just screaming out loud.
Right. I notice you're also going down Pinehurst some distance. Why was that one picked out?
We're just connecting to the 8-inch AC. I don't believe, you might be, Cuesta, maybe? We are planning to replace the 4-inch AC on Cuesta. That was, it's an adjoining street that has the same era. I don't believe it's Pinehurst. There's probably just a tie-in on Pinehurst.
It's the map on page 180.
180, 180?
Yeah. You see, there's a segment on some side street, and I thought.
Yeah, that's Cuesta.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
okay.
just above Pinehurst.
Okay, got it.
But the larger backbone that we have planned would go down Pinehurst.
Okay.
To Seascape Boulevard.
All right. Okay, thanks.
I have a question on the time it would take to do normal bidding versus having these two contractors. And
The
time.
plans that you're looking at are pretty minimal plans. They're rough. We did them, in about a day.
No, but I meant to take it through normal bidding process.
You'd have to have full.
Oh, once you that's part of the plan. Part of that is having some really ironed out plans. And the whole point of doing that is to avoid change orders in the field later. So, we're balancing the time and effort and resources up front. It's really the time here that's the most critical. But on another project, the resources you commit to developing accurate plans and specifications, you hope to recoup without having a bunch of change orders and unknowns.
And it's not unlike that we're getting competitive bidding, because you're having two vendors
Right,
who are bidding, so.
I'm not gonna tell you who, but they're, contractors that have worked
I
for
at
the
least like
district.
having two bids.
Yeah, they won't know, and it'll be sealed bids, so
Okay.
we'll bring those back to you.
That'll make me feel better.
If we open the bids and we don't like we don't have to award it, obviously.
Right.
We could then make a decision to do a full design and go out to bid.
When you do time and materials, you need to have somebody out there full-time keeping track of everything.
Yes, and so that's
Gonna
why
have staff do that, or are you thinking you'd hire a consultant?
Inspector.
we have a construction inspector that would do that, but it does tie his time up. So that's another reason why we thought we should get an itemized bid and then weigh the two and look at them and see if it's worth having someone out there really every day, pretty much all day, every day, equipment, labor, all the markups and all that. So we're aware of that. We've done it before. But it is labor intensive.
So what's the duration of this project? What do you think?
Several months. It includes services too. I failed to mention that, but when you replace the main, we'll also replace the services to the meters. Yeah. Several months.
Okay.
We are proposing to do the paving. If we do time materials, we'll probably pull out the paving, the striping, and the slurry seal, and then we can do that competitively. So we're not paying the extra markup for stuff that's not as urgent.
Okay.
So
The county's okay with that.
one question I had was, did you say in the report when you thought you'd like to have them start construction?
As soon as possible, I would say March. We'll bring this back to you on February 20th,
First.
21st, and then,
You might want to go down there at 7:50 every morning and see what the traffic's like.
yeah. The
Why?
county's gonna have restrictions on when we can get started and finish. They usually do that with their encroachment permit.
I'm
You
telling
know.
you, it's crazy. During
Okay.
the school year, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they may make us start at 8:30.
So there's three motions suggested. One to approve the environmental assessment, one to change it in priority and be funded, and the other to waive the normal bidding process and use the process that he described. Well, I'll make those motions. Anybody second?
Oh, they're all together. Oh, okay, I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All
Right,
we'll see you
motion
in 2
carries.
weeks.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Let's see, next is this overall kind of summary, community water plan summary. frequently asked questions.
You can set it up. Go ahead.
So you can look at my paper version. I asked for one when I was there the other day.
I had to reformat it.
That's okay. I can-
Sorry, this might be a little hard to read on the screen, as it is formatted for right now an 11 by 17 spreadsheet. This really came about, we have a lot of questions as we're going forward with our community water plan on what are the supply options that the district is considering, where are they in terms of evaluation, what's the cost, what's the duration, when are decisions to be made, and specifically what are the issues. We're finding that there's a lot of confusion in the public right now too, related to the options within options, specifically with the river water transfer. That is a project that is being conducted primarily with the city of Santa Cruz as the lead for the long-term option coming out of their Water Supply Advisory Committee, as well as the pilot short-term project of using excess river water from the North Coast sources. So as we started to identify and describe the projects, we also included the Pure Water Soquel project as well as the Deep Water Desal. Again, this is for the public. We did send this over to our public outreach subcommittee for some input, and we went through several rounds of this, going back and forth with the City of Santa Cruz Water Department to ensure that we were capturing the information that they have. Their information is built into their Water Supply Advisory Committee report and appendices and updates to the Water Commission. So this is a good resource for us because we too, just like the public, have to go to many documents. And specifically, there are a lot of things in that bottom section that say what are issues to consider with this option. There's a lot of questions that we have related to the project development, questions related to things specifically to the project, the Pure Water project, that we're the lead, that we're evaluating and considering as we go forward. And then with the Deep Water Desal project, we tried to capture the latest update that we got from Deep Water Desal staff, and we'll be having them present in March to give an overview. And then, as you know, Rosemary Menard will be presenting on the River Water project in February.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item? Okay. Seeing none, any board comments? Questions? Yeah, Bruce?
The column number 3, labeled in lieu water exchange with the San Lorenzo River. I think an implicit thing is that in lieu is not going to solve our problem or the city's, because current scheme, they can only give water to us in the winter time. And so in lieu doesn't have enough water they can transfer to us to give us our 1,500 acre feet. I don't notice way down in the comments there is a mention of ASR, but I think that actually needs to be up in the title, that it can't just be in lieu, it has to be in lieu / ASR to actually achieve the things that are mentioned here in terms of volume and so forth.
We had this as element 1 and 2. Currently, they haven't paired those two elements together. They are pursuing.
That'd be fine, but then we need to take out how much water could it supply. It's not going to supply 1,500 acre feet. If it's
According
just
to the city, they think that they could send us possibly up to 1,500 acre feet per year with in lieu.
Okay, that's something new to me. All right.
Yeah, I think what's important to note, and it's not very well known, you know, full basin recovery at a 70% chance of recovery was estimated by our hydrologists using a Monte Carlo simulation model. And so they said it would take 3,000 acre feet a year for 20 years to replenish the basin. And that would, by using 3,000 feet, you have a 70% chance of success. What's interesting, it's not linear as you go up. So if you go to and that was chosen by the board a while back when we were trying to do the whole load, and it was all we could possibly even imagine doing. But if you go up to a 90%, I want to consider a 90% chance of success, then it more than doubles that amount. So just going from a 70 to a 90% chance of success doubles the amount of water needed to achieve basin sustainability. So even, I'm just accenting on your point, Director Daniels, that even with, if you could get a full 3,000 acre feet, 1,500 and 1,500 from each method, that under current estimates is only would achieve, you'd have a 70% chance of success of preventing seawater intrusion.
I have a question on that same column, because those dates for their process don't sound like the ones I recently heard.
I agree with you. These are the published dates within the WASAC recommendations. So it isn't the only thing in terms of a source document to pull from. Perhaps when we get an update from Rosemary here at the board, we can modify that based on her information that she shared.
Those dates being a little bit later than what it says there. Like it wouldn't even be starting an EIR till 2020.
Yeah.
But we did get a updated schedule from Rosemary, like about a year ago. It was past WASAC, and
it's later than this.
we should use the most recent ones that we have officially, versus going back to some older document.
Because I heard a 2025 in there.
Yep.
Certain things stick in my mind. Anyone
Yeah,
else?
Well, I had that note, I had the relative dates now.
Yeah, okay. You heard the same thing I did.
But I would like at some point to know how you can just do in lieu and get 1,500 acre
I
feet.
think that'd be a really good question in terms of when we gather questions for Rosemary's presentation.
Okay.
I think from what I've heard, that project as they're going through its feasibility, they're including in lieu both to the neighbor agencies of Soquel Creek Water District as well as up to the north. So that is, I think.
Well, doesn't help us. I mean, they can send it to, Arizona, and that doesn't help us. So it has to be how much we can get from this. So if it's 750 that we get and 750 Scotts Valley gets, then the number here should be 750.
Well, I don't think that's been decided.
And this question
The
specifically,
question technically is, how can you bloody well get 750 or 1,500 into the ground if you only get winter water?
Right.
In the wintertime, our usage is half the summer usage.
Right.
So we can stop pumping completely in the winter, and, even that doesn't get us very far.
Right.
It doesn't get us
So
1,500.
that's an upper limit. But there could be a lower limit depending on how the water is transferred to Scotts Valley versus Soquel Creek.
Well, this is, I'm assuming, can be updated as we get new data.
this is, again, kind of the issues that we face in trying to provide information when the information continues to evolve with this option that we're not the lead agency on.
Well, let me compliment you on putting something together that at least puts it in one place and getting the best information that we've got.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we shouldn't put so much information if we don't really know how accurate it is, though. Like,
Well,
because
Yeah.
this is really valuable. I reformatted it and taped it together as a reference just to have it as a markup thing, but maybe it has a little too much information in it.
Well, what we try to do, and maybe it does, but is just provide the best information to date. One thing we know for sure, things are changing, on a weekly basis. So I wouldn't take one number and hold it strong and fast, but trying to, if people are willing to go along with that moving picture, although it is risky to throw a number out, people tend to latch onto it if they don't
That's
see
the
another
thing.
meeting.
and the dates out, if people
Yeah.
don't realize that this is a big difference in
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah, and the
Right.
model may change things dramatically, even the chance of success of preventing seawater intrusion and all those numbers. So,
But it's a really good idea. It is clearly says draft and everything, but
Yeah.
still.
maybe we, one other option is to put in the title, note, this is a evolving situation. Numbers and dates will change as progress is made, just caveat it.
Well, it has a date, January 31st.
Has a date. We did try and say it's based on assumptions. Each option is at different stages of concept and development. We are trying to source if that's coming from the Water Supply Advisory Committee, or if the information in the left column is coming from our water purchase agreement with the pilot project. But you're right, there's still, a lot of people are questioning some of these because they don't even like the assumptions that we're citing, which are the published assumptions. So It's challenging, and we don't want to use a number that the city of Santa Cruz isn't using. So if we're questioning a number that the city is using, like a number, or information that was recently shared, once it's shared publicly and they acknowledge it, I feel like we could put it in here.
Okay. Well, that should be in 2 weeks.
Yes.
And
Rosemary
if
Minogue.
there are,
I'm gonna miss that.
if there's uncertainty, you can use language to say maybe,
Possibly,
yeah.
instead of approximately.
Well, I noticed in here for some things, like, the Pure Water Soquel, we have a 60 to 70 million. So if we're not sure, a range is a good way to express uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a range in the projects that would depend on which project.
So some of these things, that we're unclear about, we should put a range. Or don't put, if we're not even sure at all, just don't put a number.
Right.
Just say, can supply us some water or something.
You can use qualitative terms.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, I thought some of the money numbers were pretty, the value of having it all together, all as you can do at a site, compare what's going on at a glance, but if the numbers are way off, that wouldn't be too helpful. But if it's just a ballpark, and we acknowledge that in the title, which of course I formatted out of the graph, but but if you had the title and you acknowledge that and have the date, then you could fill the date just like our manager report, or the summary. Things we've changed get highlighted, and because if it's going to be a flowing document, I think it could be really useful, but you'd have to really mark what some of that stuff is.
Yeah, I think, specifically, I know that a lot of people gravitate towards cost as a number, especially when they're trying to compare things. So really, in terms of cost, all of these are being developed. They should not be looked at really in an apples-to-apples comparison, because just the level of information to base those cost estimates shouldn't be looked at, which is what we tried to quantify. Originally, we had 131 to 159 as a spread. The city of Santa Cruz asked us that we split that out, so that 131 was associated with the information there. That was for in lieu and the upgrades at Graham Hill, and they specifically wanted that to be labeled as element 1, and then element 2 would be if they decided that they needed to go with aquifer storage and recovery wells. The other challenging part of this is that there's always other costs and other projects related. The city of Santa Cruz, as you guys know, we do have constituents that tell us that there's even another option to consider with river water transfer that's, $10 to $15 million. So, we've asked the city, is that something that you're looking at? They've said no, but at least, we continue to get those questions. So we did add something at the bottom that says, we need to better understand what all the river water transfer options are.
I'm still worried about the thing Bruce brought up, where it just says that in lieu could meet our needs. And
Yeah,
so possibly that could say if both elements 1 and 2 are completed, or something that.
Yeah, it may be
because
more
people are going to hang
complex
on to
than
that number.
It may be more complex than that. I think, what Director Daniels is thinking is maybe in the wintertime during that months, we only use, let's say, 800 acre feet a year. So how could we possibly take 1,500? But let's we're trying to cite the documents where they've worked from. Maybe the window's expanded. Maybe there's operational things they could do. I don't know, but I'm just thinking, these are questions we can ask, and they're good questions, because if you keep within that window, we don't use that much water. Our customers do not use that much water.
That's the point.
Yeah, that's the point. So maybe there's something else, and we should ask that question. There's a lot of...
And maybe we need to say the uncertainty there in that document. I
Okay,
think.
I will definitely do some qualifying.
Because it may give a
language on
falsehood that we could attain that. I
Right.
see from your...
I don't want
Yeah.
that to get out there.
And the other thing is that, simply because they say they could supply us 1,500 acre feet, doesn't mean that we can accept 1,500
Right,
acre feet.
absolutely.
And therefore, that makes it not work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah.
But, the idea is take these things and refine it, but try to put it, I commend Melanie for at least, and Rebecca
Absolutely.
for putting it in one place to
It's a good
starting.
start.
Yeah,
It
it's a
is.
good start.
It's great. All right, we good?
Yep, we'll modify
Okay.
that. Thank you.
So item 7.7 is the grant to see this facility in Washington.
can do this one.
No, you go for it.
Yes, as you know, we find that looking at facilities that, you know, are either desalination, stormwater capture, recycled water projects are very valuable for us in terms of educating ourselves in how systems operate and function and what are the concerns in a community. So, you know, to add on some of the tours that the district has been doing in terms of educating ourselves with recycled water projects, we applied for a grant to go and explore a facility up in Washington that uses membrane bioreactor technology. MBR technology is an option that the district board has asked us to consider for the Pure Water Soquel project, whereby untreated wastewater would go through this membrane bioreactor process, then the advanced treatment. In Washington, they're using membrane bioreactor treatment at the Martin Way facility up in Lacey, Washington, to treat 2 million gallons a day for groundwater replenishment. We applied for a grant that was specifically for agencies to go and look at sites. I've toured this facility already with Rochelle and Taj, but it would be a really great experience, especially with the grant money, to have the board go and look at this, look at the facility, see the facility, smell the facility. I think this will address a lot of the questions that the community has related to the MBR treatment. Whether or not that the board wants to continue to move forward with that, if we get the secondary, I think it's still just in terms of educating ourselves on what could be if we did this technology. So we've been in contact with the facility manager and the outreach team over in Lot, and they've proposed that we could have a delegation go on Thursday, March 2nd. It's a one-day trip. We'd fly out of San Jose pretty early in the morning. There's like a 7 a.m. flight. We would tour the facility in the afternoon. It's about an hour drive from the airport, do the tour, then come back and fly back from Seattle around 7 o'clock. It is a long day, but we're proposing to do that as a one day to reduce costs in terms of, you know, lodging. If the board wants to, you know, extend that to a 2-day period, we can. So what we're asking for this item is just to authorize the board who wants to attend with that as a motion. The second item is to discuss with the board that, as you know, we're pursuing grant money as we're conducting a lot of the studies and feasibility. There is a new program that's out. It's a federal program called WIFIA. It's the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act funding. This is actually a loan program that has a window that's open right now for us to submit an application between now and April 10th. We've been talking with Lydia Gutierrez, who is our grant and funding consultant, and she recommended that we pursue this and get our name and submit an application in, because it's actually a couple-year process. It's a short window that they're accepting applications. They likely won't be opening and accepting applications for a couple years. So it would be a good opportunity for us. You know, with federal money right now, we're not quite sure based on the new administration that's there, but there is, you know, a lot of emphasis on infrastructure projects. So it would be advantageous for us to at least get our foot in the door.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public wishes to comment on this item? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I looked online and I saw a picture, an overview of where the location of this is, and I understand it's in a field, not in a high residential neighborhood. And apparently you folks are going to be looking at it, and the West Annex location is a high, dense residential area versus a field, and that's why a lot of these places are in fields and not in high residential. And I need you to keep in mind that just visiting it for a day about smell and sound, which is our major concern for our neighborhood, it's not the same as visiting as it is living there 24/7. On weekends, we're out in our gardens, we have our children running around. It's not the same thing, and the standard for sound and smell is that it's supposed to stay within the perimeter of the zoning, is staying within the perimeter of your boundaries. So that means it cannot go beyond your boundaries lines. And you've got to keep that in mind, that if the wind blows, those things are going to, and the membrane unit, you have to clean it constantly. Those membranes have to be replaced. The chemicals that are used are highly toxic, and you've got electric blowers that, if you look at the maps about the placement of those facilities, so we're going to have 24/7 of those kind of electrical units. And so unless you're actually having that facility cleaned out while you're touring it and having those membranes replaced, et cetera, then you're not really in a position to evaluate that accurately. And it'd be interesting to see what the board does in terms of finding studies that have been done about residential areas that have these membrane units in them, because that's the only way that you're truly going to analyze the effect and the harm that it can be done. And again, this is this serious consideration, because there are other alternative sites that have been taken off the table that need to be brought back on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Any board questions?
Well, I was going to offer that my ticket could go to this lady so she could go see the facility with you, but I'm not sure if you could do that.
Right, we understand. Well, we're not going to get into dialogue back and forth right now.
Well,
Okay, sorry, public comment period's over for this, so we're not going to keep a dialogue going.
so I was going to suggest that, but I won't, because apparently.
So fine. I have a question of what the loan, these seem like very different items. I'm not sure why they're together.
Great.
And so
We piggybacked. Basically, the WIFIA, the Water Infrastructure Innovation Funding, came in on Friday. Karen was generous enough to let us modify and get that item in.
Okay,
Because
I didn't see the
urgent.
connection otherwise. All right.
Yeah.
They're both kind of funding grant.
Understood. There's the
Stretch.
nexus. Okay,
Yeah.
but what would the amount of the loan be, and exactly what are we talking about? Is this for actual building a facility? Is this for feasibility studies? EIR? What is this?
Again, the loan program has different kind of pots of money. We've heard, from Leslie, we aren't going to be borrowing any money until there's a project. So at this point, it's just for studies and evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
we spent a couple hours with our consultant looking through this and asking, and it's one of those things that I think Melanie said it's probably another couple of years before she thinks we'll get a shot at this. We went through the rough criteria. Some we don't apply, if you're an energy producer or something like that, but some we do apply for the major portion, and really what we're asking for is to solicit a proposal, and that'll be brought back and we'll have a better idea. But we don't want to go forth with it and put somebody through that work if it's not something the board's interested in.
Okay.
But we have kind of vetted it to, as much as you can, one of these, because it's very high level what they have on the available to read.
Yeah, the feds call it a letter of interest, but it's more than just a letter. It's a 25-page submittal package that needs to be sent in. So what we're proposing is that Lydia Gutierrez could help us write that, so we'll get a proposal from her to bring back to the next board to consider, and then that letter is due April 10th.
So we're not approving any proposal right now. We're just saying go ahead and get a proposal from her to develop this grant. Okay.
Right. And she's the person who worked with Melanie on the state application, and our application just got bumped up to another level.
Okay. Yes, Bruce.
And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that WIFIA is a loan program, not a grant program.
Loan.
And they don't want little loans. They're not going to loan us for our feasibility study. We're talking about here is a loan for the whole project kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
tens of millions of dollars kind of a thing. So what we're talking about, I think, is putting our foot in the door here, and it might pay off down the road for the whole
Melanie's
big
done some
project.
calculations on the loan return, haven't you?
Yeah, based on the interest rate right now, the low interest loans, some of them are like at 3%. So a project that's our size, which is 50 to 60 million, it's the equivalent of like a $15 million grant. if we were to get those. So what Lydia's going to look at more and what we'll bring back in the proposal is, yes, it's a foot in the door. It's if there is any immediate money, we as the district aren't going for large capital improvement costs loans because the project has not been approved. But if it does indeed take a 2 to 3 year process, once we do decide to do that, that's in alignment with the board to be at a point where a decision could be made, the EIR could be considered to be certified, and then if we are going forward, we don't have to wait for the next cycle of WIFIA letters to be solicited.
So it's a calculated approach.
So the foot in the door, how long is that foot in the door for?
It's a new program, but from what Lydia says, it's right here. It is expected that the next WIFIA cycle for submission of letters of interest would be in the next 2 to 3 years. So we're 17, 2019, 2020 would be the next time that, and then a couple years to do the whole package for the money.
Might be too late.
Or you could possibly get money to be paid back.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the program yet, which is why we're asking Lydia to help us.
Okay. Yeah. And it's not a commitment. I mean, even if we did a letter, we could decline, if something else.
All right, well, any
Did we
motions?
motion that? Did we do both motions? then?
No, you could,
Uh,
or you could separate them.
Actually, do we know all the board members who are going?
I think, is there interest in the board to go on the tour on March 2nd?
I had some questions about that. I imagine, tell me about the tour you went on, is that they'd love to take you out and show you the ponds and the recharge that happens through the ponds, and that's clearly not interest to us because we're never going to do that, right?
They mostly showed us the treatment facility. It actually was
Okay.
very interesting. The one thing that you do have to understand that it's just one part of a treatment, that we were looking at. It's not, we're considering doing multiple, not just the membranes.
Right.
And because they're out away from houses, they didn't put as much emphasis into the sound that we would.
In fact, it sounds like it's
But it
largely
didn't-
underground.
It's all underground. I didn't smell anything. All the noise is underground.
Well, again, I wonder how comparable that is. We weren't planning on putting our facility underground, were we? Or
Yeah.
could we? We
We
were?
could put the pumps underground.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And we're hoping not to even do a membrane reactor, so,
But
I don't know.
But, it could be one of those things that makes you say, you know what, we don't want to do a membrane reactor, or.
Now, I don't want to do a
this-
membrane
No, I
reactor
know
right now
that. I know
today.
that, but even further, we're, your guiding principles were clear on that you adopted last meeting. But it's an opportunity just to understand that portion of the technology, because you've toured several facilities that have done the second leg of this, the advanced purification. So,
In fact, I'm hoping by March, we might be able to have a contract to deliver us secondary water, and then we can just throw the membrane possibility away and not even have to consider it. That's
Is-
what I want to do.
Is there, that's my goal too.
Yes.
you
So,
don't have to do it here.
Is there, would we have to do it right then, or could we put this off and see if we're even going to deal with a membrane bioreactor? Or does this grant have a particular time frame?
No, this grant is through the end of the year. There was $30,000. They awarded it to 8 agencies nationally. Small, I think everybody that asked kind of for a small amount like us, they were able to spread the money out. If we don't want to use it, we definitely don't have to.
But my point is
I do have to-
we'd rather not have to use it for that
Well,
particular thing.
what if it doesn't work out with the city and you need to do some kind of pre-treatment?
Then we
You
go on a
don't ha-
trip.
But you don't have to do it there. You could be doing it like at Lode Street or at Soquel Pump Station. It's
But I mean,
not
if we have a
relevant.
contract from the city for secondary water, then we don't need to worry about it.
Mhm.
And I'm
we could
hoping
do it
we'll
right
know
here.
that within a short period of time.
so what,
Question, could we delay this?
That's my
that's
question.
the question, yeah.
We can
But
do it.
instead
So
of
I have a
making it-
conference call with the agencies that put this out next week, and I will ask and confirm that we can do this later in the year, that I don't have to say yes, and then we claim it and they can't push it back out, or if I can delay it and then do it. They've asked that we kind of try and do tours before the end of the fiscal year, or at the end of the calendar year. I said probably by the end of the fiscal year, but I can see if I can delay that.
But
I mean, June would be fine. We should know by then, I would hope.
Yeah.
that's my feeling on that one. I'd rather
I'm
wait
not,
and see.
I'm not going, let's put it that way. Because I don't want to have to go.
I'm not able to go at that time.
Okay.
Well, I can go, but if, I'd be the only one, I guess.
Well, why don't we delay? The reason why we were working on that March 2nd was because we know that it is your goal to secure secondary effluent. We thought that, once we came back, you'd have a full informed of what a potential MBR would look like, as well as the secondary contract, as well as the siting study again to look at, is there potential for an alternate location to the West Annex that was part of the guiding principle. So like Rochelle said, if you were to move the MBR somewhere else, you'd at least have a look and feel and sight of this facility. But if you don't want to do that, it's totally fine as well.
The other thing is, what if we do get a contract for secondary effluent, and then there's another opportunity to see a place that's in a residential area that has been done really well, so that we can see if it's doable for just a polishing purification plant, and that might be more valuable to us than going and seeing something that we know we're not doing.
So why don't what I hear you saying is you don't want to go if we don't need to go, because you want to secure secondary or tertiary. So what I hear you saying, Melanie, is you'll go back and see what the options are, and we can bring that back to the board. Can we postpone it? Because we don't want to use the money that somebody else might want to use it too.
Right.
That's not a good thing to do. So.
I could also see if we could use the money to go to a facility that's in a residential area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we need to.
Okay.
But see if we got some flexibility. So
Sure.
I guess I'd like to see that one come back after that information.
So there's a second motion, though.
Right, that's a
Bonus.
whole separate thing, yeah. You making that one?
So I'm not clear on the scope. This would probably be a pretty large proposal, and I don't want to, without knowing if we're successful in this proposal, and our timetable is longer than this letter is good for, haven't we just wasted that money? Am I missing something?
We're only getting a letter,
Letter of interest.
we're only asking her to provide us with a proposal for how much it would cost her to write this grant.
Right, but I don't want to have her do that unless we're going to go through with it if we like the proposal. So I'm trying to understand what the grant is more.
Oh.
So it's
Well,
for
it's not a grant, it's a low interest loan through the Federal Infrastructure Program. The details of it is part of the work for Lydia to bring the to the board.
By having her do this proposal, it allows us to apply for this low interest.
It allows us to be considered to apply. It's a letter of interest.
Okay.
Much like the state just did their step 1, step 2, and we got
Pre-application and then a full application.
And we would,
That
we're
and
fairly
for
sure we're going to be applying in timeframes.
no, I think I think it depends on if this is a project that the board wants to construct and design and build. We would go forward with money. I think it's kind of the due diligence of creating the opportunity for us to seek money that's outside of our ratepayers, and there is a little bit of additional work and effort to be positioned for that money.
I'd be supportive of a little bit, but the definition of a little bit.
So at the next board meeting, you'll have that proposal, and you can say, I'm comfortable with this, or this is too much. We're asking right now because We did have some money for Lydia to do some grant work for us this fiscal year, and because of the pre-application with the Prop 1 and the stuff that we've been doing related with the Bureau of Reclamation for the Title 16, we reached it. It was a small contract, and so we need to add a little bit to her to carry us through for the end of the fiscal year.
Well, I'll make the motion that we direct staff to solicit a proposal from them.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I think that is the end of our open meeting. We're adjourning the meeting to a closed session. Thank you for coming.